Good day, everyone. This is co-host John Schlarbaum, here to inform you that a new companion book to the podcast is now out. Titled Music Virgin No More, I delve deeper into how my weekly charts began and why the music from the early 80s still influences the preferences of millions of listeners 45 years later. Again, the book is Music Virgin No More, a fun and easy read filled with facts about the singles, albums, and groups you still love today. Purchase your copy on Amazon for only $15, and thanks for downloading today's episode, which begins right now.
CJBK London, it's 154.
Welcome, music fans, to the Music Virgins No More podcast. Now here are your hosts, John and Jason.
Hello, and welcome to the Music Virgins No More podcast. I'm John Schlarbaum.
And I'm Jason Kavanaugh.
Now, for those new to the podcast, it's based on my early teen memories of top 40 music between 1979 and 1982, when I created 106 weekly music charts typed on a Smith Corona portable typewriter alone in my childhood bedroom. Now, for each podcast, we'll dive deep into these historic charts and discuss the music that, in part, became the soundtrack of my life and many of my friends' life who were just starting high school.
Today's episode will cover the three final weeks of December 1980, starting with chart number 17 for the week ending December 13th.
Now, the interesting aspect of this chart, Jason, is that there was no further singles or albums that would debut in 1980 on any of my charts. So positions might change, but nothing new was on the horizon over the holiday period.
And also, like the anomalies of Queen having two songs in the top 6 on September 27th, 1980, and Pat Benatar with 2 songs in top 10 in October, the Police raised the stakes. The Police, John, with 2 songs, both rising in the top 7. But first, let's start with one of the week's 2 new singles entering at number 11, Roger Daltrey of The Who.
Yeah, so this is, Without Your Love is a very, sort of non-Who-like song because, one, it's not written by, Pete Townsend. And it was the only 45 I bought in December 1980, which is, kind of crazy because I'm always buying singles every few weeks. And my dad was, running into London or St. Thomas to buy me, my list of needed music. And now this song was actually off a film soundtrack of McVicker, which is the story of a English bank robber, John McVicker, who Daltrey actually played in the movie. So he's not only just Tommy when Daltrey, when they make the Tommy movie, he's not just Tommy. He is now John McVicker. So he was trying to get away from, the music and stage and, become a serious actor. Now, I've never watched the movie. I don't really know if it's good or bad, but I always really love this very simple ballad and Daltrey's performance. And Jason, we were talking just off mic about the artists that I've sort of turned you on to because of this podcast and everything. And one of them was obviously Pete Townsend, his solo career. Now, I'd already discovered Pete Townsend earlier in 1980 with the Empty Glass album. So maybe there was just members of The Who were on my mind at the end of the year. Who knows?
But did you actually own any Who albums?
No, the only thing I ever owned was their greatest hits cassette a few years later, which I loved because it had all their hits and all these album tracks that I'd never heard of. With this song, with Roger Daltrey's song, I'd have to wait another 5 years to hear his next solo album, which is called Under the Raging Moon, which was it was a rock album, but it was also dedicated to Keith Moon, the drummer for the Who. It's a very good album out there, but because of like this song and other songs, I became sort of a fan of later day Roger Daltrey albums.
Now, you did that kind of backwards. You did the solo artists first to then discover that. Like that's like getting into McCartney first and then discovering the Beatles. Now, isn't that what happened to you as well?
Well, I think basically, because I mean, everybody knew the Beatles. Like growing up, even my brother, he might have had a greatest hits or love songs of the Beatles. I don't know, some kind of compilation. But I would have had the Red and Blue albums, the double albums, probably when I was 13, 12, 13. So I knew the Beatles, but for some reason I started getting into Paul McCartney, and once I got into him, it was all about Wings. And it really wasn't until the CDs came out, the Beatles CDs came out in 1987, that I became, really big fans of theirs, because, now I had entire full albums of theirs, which I hadn't been exposed to before. So, now I'm a huge Beatles fan of all of their stuff, and I'm only a big fan of Paul McCartney on some of his stuff.
Backwards John, okay. This week's other new single logged in at number 12, Blondie's The Tide is High, the first single off the new album Autoamerican, which entered at number 8 on the albums chart.
Now, this song and this album really has a very strange history with me, because after, the double whammy of their 1978 album Parallel Lines and then their follow-up Eat to the Beat albums, I remember eagerly waiting for this new collection of songs. And like many listeners, The Tide is High seemed like a musical shift with it's sort of a straightforward, free, carefree reggae beat, and had a Caribbean feel. Like sort of gone was the pop / punk leaning / 60s girl groups attitude of their previous two albums. Yet somehow they got away with it, and the song became a major hit around the world and would do the unthinkable on my charts in the new year, Jason. I'm just going to leave it at that. What the unthinkable, could be to our listeners out there. Oh my goodness, what did Blondie do?
Let me guess, 3 songs in the charts at the same time?
No, something even bigger. But anyways, we will get to that maybe if we have a second season. but for right now, they did the unthinkable. This song became bigger than I thought it would ever be, and looking back on it, I'm like you. I asked myself, what were you thinking, John? Because over the years, the song has just become sort of a nothing song to me whatsoever. But there was a time that it was huge.
Okay, and now the original, idea for this podcast was for you to break my 80s music virginity, because at the time I was kind of anti-80s. And slowly, as you mentioned earlier, Pete Townsend solo stuff started to creep into my life because of you, and now I've got into the Pretenders. John, should I listen to Blondie? What album should I listen to? Where should I start?
You should start with Parallel Lines.
Okay.
It is a flawless 10, 12 song pop gem that is, forget about, the song off of there by Nose is Heart of Glass, obviously. But all the other songs, it is just classic from start to finish.
Okay, it holds up.
It really does hold up. Eat to the Beat, their follow-up. I just listened to that a few weeks ago, and it's not too bad. There's a couple of songs you go, I don't think so.
Okay, speaking of albums, onto the albums chart. Double Fantasy by John Lennon and Yoko Ono debuted at number 5, which you previously purchased after his untimely death. Did you feel pressured to buy it then?
I'm sure it would have been purchased regardless, just like Starting Over single had been number 1 2 weeks earlier on my charts. So I was primed for more great songs, at least from, John Lennon. Yoko, not so much, as we've discussed on previous shows. It's a great half an album. I'll say that.
I mean, I guess you didn't really feel the pressure because, Keith Moon died in 78 and you didn't rush out and buy a bunch of Who albums.
I didn't. I didn't. Again, going back to the Who, I knew some of the songs like Who Are You and Pinball Wizard, things like that. I mean, I would know who they are, but I just never went out and bought their music. Again, it's one of those things where if I had an older brother, well, I did have an older brother. If I had an older brother who was into sort of like the classic rock of Led Zeppelin and the Who and the Rolling Stones and that, and some through osmosis or our 8-track cassette player, in the same room, I would have learned more about the Who. But the Who it was a late discovery.
Now, on to the top 15 groups chart. John Lennon made his first appearance entering at number 12 as a solo artist. Yoko was nowhere to be found.
I don't think she'd ever be on my list for anything, really, aside from, the actual name of the album, Double Fantasy, and who it is. I'm not sure. Let me just check the actual chart. Do I have John and Yoko? I actually do. On the physical type chart, it does say Double Fantasy dash John Lennon / Yoko Ono. So she did make my chart. Now the thing with with him coming into the top 15 groups, which again is this is only week number 17, of my 106. So in that short period with Lennon's addition, another longtime artist was bumped completely off the charts, which was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, who 4 months earlier was my number 6 group on chart number 1, which seems crazy that I would just lose that much interest in Tom Petty, to go from number 6 to, number whatever, right? He's number 16 at the minimum. But I don't think we have to worry about Tom because he'll be back in 1981 with the release of a new album and very much has great chart success. So don't worry about Tom, okay? He's okay. He's going to be all right.
I'm sure he'll do okay throughout the rest of the 80s.
He did all right. He did okay.
Thank you, Jeff Lynne. As no new songs would be entering the singles charts, let's just run down this week's top 10 singles.
So number 10, Jason, this week, what was the number 10 single?
Split Enz gave us I Got You.
It's an excellent song. What about number 9?
AC/DC, formerly at number 1, You Shook Me All Night Long, which is, I would say, their best song.
I would say it's their best song too, but there's chart issues for the year end that we'll have to get to in maybe a bonus episode. At number 8, apparently it's another former number 1 song.
And another great song written by John Deacon. Another one bites the dust.
Da-da-dum, bum, bum. Not one of their best songs, but a very good song. And at number 7, which was this week's fastest mover up 4 spots.
Do by The Police.
That's not the full title. What's the full title, Jason? You can do the whole thing. It's like Obla Di Obla Da. You have to do the whole. What's the Police's song?
You're just trying to get me to sing do da 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 by The Police.
All right, perfect. All right, and at number 6,
More Than I Can Say by Leo Sayer.
Number 5. This is crazy, right?
Yeah. What were you thinking, John? The Police again with Don't Stand So Close to Me.
All right, they're on the move. Okay, and at number 4,
Whip It by Devo, the quintessential 80s song.
It kind of is. Number 3, a classic British artist.
Up 2 spots, Cliff Richard's Dreaming.
Number 2, another classic British artist.
John Lennon taking over at number 2, Just Like Starting Over. And this one's a big shock.
Number 1 for the second week is
Hungry Heart by Bruce Springsteen.
I'm shocked.
Me too.
I really am. It did take him 2 weeks to get to number 1. That was a shocker. That was last episode though. So everybody who didn't listen to our last podcast, go back a week. You'll figure it out. So that's when you look at it, it's not really a bad, top 10 for that week. I would play all those songs again. But let's move on to chart number 18 for the following week ending December 20th, 1980. So only 5 days until Christmas, Jason. What's happening?
Well, predictably, everything new last week ended up being the fastest movers on all 3 charts. Without Your Love by Roger Daltrey jumped from 11 to 4, which is a big jump. On the singles chart, John Lennon rose from 12 to number 5 on the groups chart, and Blondie's Autoamerican moved up 3 spots to number 5 on the albums chart.
Now, can you imagine if that John Lennon album was all John Lennon, all 10 or 12 songs were just him? He might have went past number 5, right? I think Yoko's holding him back and he just goes from 12 to 5, but we will never know.
On the illustrious John Schlarbaum charts.
They're historic. They are. Okay, so on the single chart, to me, it's interesting that the top 4 spots are held by veteran musicians from the late 1950s, Cliff Richard, the 1960s, John Lennon, Roger Daltrey, and 1970s, Bruce Springsteen. But nipping at their heels were this new musical guard with the Police, with 2 singles, Devo and the aforementioned Blondie.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I was still unsure what was going to happen in the rock industry. If legacy artists would continue or if they were just a flash in the pan. I mean, I was just listening to some stuff about the Beatles where, year 3 or 4 in, they're thinking, maybe, Mal Evans was thinking maybe he should get a backup plan just in case this Beatles thing doesn't work out. And here we are in 2024 and we're getting the last, for sure, 100% last Beatles song ever.
Lies.
Yeah.
What?
So seeing this at the beginning of the 80s, we're 25 years on from the 50s, and Cliff Richard still has a career, which was just not expected. It was song to song back then. I better put out another good song because who knows if I'll be flipping burgers next week.
And again, I mean, Bruce Springsteen just went back on tour. A couple days ago, here in March 2024, he's back on tour, putting on, 3-hour shows again. He's a madman.
And how old is he?
I don't know, 72, 71, 72.
I'm looking this up. I can't believe you don't know this offhand. You don't know his shoe size and toothbrush preference?
I really don't.
He is 74, John.
Which is crazy.
I mean, he's playing stadiums and he could have been playing bars in his late 70s.
It could be.
And moving on the Canadian RPM magazine's top 50 singles chart for this week, the Police were once again denied the number 1 spot due to extraordinary circumstances. In January, it was Rapper's Delight, jumping from number 10 ahead of them, Message in a Bottle. And now, here in December, it was Just Like Starting Over, going from number 28 to number 1, besting Don't Stand So Close to Me.
Which it seems kind of, they did okay. The Police did okay, moving forward and everything. But I just found it very, interesting that the 2 times that they were poised to oh my God, we're going to be number, what happened? What do you mean? Who are these guys? Right? Like twice in January and in December, they could not catch a break.
Well, and Rapper's Delight must have been a big surprise for everybody.
It kind of is. I mean, the historic part of Rapper's Delight, again, I knew nothing about, I think we've said this in other podcasts, I knew nothing about the song, obviously, because, I was 13 at the time and I just never heard Rapper's Delight. And then I open up my London Free Press that Friday and I open it up and it says number 1 is Rapper's Delight. I'm like, what is this? I need this. And I had my dad go pick it up. And then I had it. I had it right from the very start. I don't know how high, it didn't end up on my end of the year chart. So I guess I didn't like it all that much. But yeah, it was just kind of crazy. And then obviously at the end of the year, Just Like Starting Over, everything during this week was all John Lennon because of his, untimely murder. I guess any murder's untimely, right, Jason?
Yeah.
But, it was just everybody was John Lennon. The album had come out and everybody went, oh, well, that's kind of nice. And then all of a sudden he's killed and you have all these retrospective, reviews months later. Oh, he was so good. And you're like, no, you got it right the first time. If that's what you thought the first time, that's what you thought. But yeah, the album and the single went on. The next single in Canada, Woman, I think was number 1 for several weeks in Canada too, which to me, that's more astounding. But back to my charts, because my charts are the important part here. On my albums chart for this week, the Police's Zenyatta Mandata slipped comfortably into the number 2 position with John Lennon / Yoko Ono, moving up 2 spots to number 3. And they're both behind Bruce Springsteen's The River album, which was number 1 for a 4th straight week.
Yet the biggest jump on that chart was Blondie's new disc that apparently you have a very troubled relationship with.
Troubled is a good word. So, as I said earlier, the remarkable thing about this album is when I recently looked at the track listing, the only songs I could recall were the singles, which were The Tide is High and Rapture. The rest is like a complete mystery to me. Over the years, I just kind of dismissed the album as a whole and never, revisited it. And even when I replayed it a few months ago, thinking, hey, maybe I'm older, wiser, I'll look at this album again and maybe I missed something the first time around. Again, none of the non-hits ignited any memories, that like not even like a cool musical part or some kind of interesting sing-along chorus. I just have no idea why I liked it so much. There must be something else in the cultural atmosphere that, she was always being played on, video shows or something. But yeah, I go back to this album and go, I don't get it. And you look at the reviews from back then, and a lot of reviewers go, yeah, we don't get this. These guys, again, they took a couple of good albums, Parallel Lines and Eat to the Beat, and then I don't know if they got too big for themselves or whatever it was. They're like, oh, we can do anything. And the problem was they shouldn't have. They tweaked their sound too much and tried too many different genres to make it a cohesive album.
Okay, but we have weekly typed up evidence that you had initially played it nonstop for weeks on end, Sean.
Weeks on end, Jason. I was shocked to learn it was on my album chart for 19 weeks, peaking at number 3 and staying in the top 5 for 11 weeks. It only finally dropped out of my top 10 on April 25th, 1981. I have no explanation for this. It's like, a musical black hole in my head or a traumatic incident that I forced myself to suppress over the years.
I think it's just another example that we've talked about before, how our memories don't quite align with the facts, especially 40 years later.
Exactly. I mean, we've talked about, certain singles that, I've said that, oh, if you asked me what my, top singles, great 80s songs were, I would say, I'd give you a name, and then I would find out that it was on my charts, at the height of its popularity for 2 weeks and then disappeared. So now, Jason, do you have any sort of black hole albums that you have rediscovered on a streaming service and wondered, what was I thinking? Or I don't remember any of this.
No, John, I have perfect musical taste and have my whole life. And I listen to the same albums. No, actually, I have a vague memory of maybe you introducing me to this band. And the memory in my brain is they kind of have like a Supertramp sound, but poppy. You might like them. They're called The Feeling. And it was an album called 12 Stops in a Home. This was back in 2007.
Okay.
And at the time, there was about 5 or 6 songs on it that I went, yeah, this is, musical perfection. This is amazing. This is whatever. And my wife and I were talking the other day about music, and I just set up my 71 Kenwood hi-fi speakers.
Ooh, fancy!
I thought, I'm gonna put on a playlist of stuff from kind of that era, and I said, oh yeah, the Feeling. I loved this band, and I put the first song on and went, I did. Why? Like, they're good. Don't get me wrong, but it didn't last the test of time.
Right, and I'm trying to think of what the actual. I don't know. Like when you said that, I'm thinking, oh, that's that group that you might have sent me a song of, but I'm, looking at their page and I'm like, yeah, that's not the song that I know, or that one, or that one, or that one.
Well, I can list them to you. Never Be Lonely, Fill My Little World, and Love It When You Call. We're kind of the three big poppy singles. Yes. That's
the one. Love It When You Call is the song that I still have on my my phone or my iPod or iPod phone thing or whatever. I love that song. That's such a great song. But yeah, I could also see where you look and go, oh my God, I love that so much, and then you go back, and go, I don't remember anything. There's a couple of albums from a Canadian group called Haywire that in the mid '80s that were really big. Like and my year-end charts, they were like at number 3 behind like Bryan Adams or Tom Petty or something. And recently I listened to those in my car and I'm like, yeah, that was okay, but I don't know why I like them that much. They're not a black hole. Like I could sort of half sing along to, whatever they were doing. But yeah, you just sort of, you look back and go, I was in a phase. To me, I never got into a lot of phases. I was in this phase of what you're, even, here in, when I'm 13 with these albums, 13 and 14 singles and albums that I'm charting for 2 years, I sort of stayed in that lane for, the next 40 years, right? There's not a lot of difference. Sometimes every once in a while, I will find a band that I'm like, oh, I really like them. But, for the most part, I've stayed in this lane until that lane, came to a crashing end in the 90s. And, I just stopped listening to music. And I just went back to the same people again. So it worked out perfectly.
Well, no, you did find one band that I constantly ask you, what are you thinking? And that's the band Train. But we can get into that another time.
Train. Moving on. Train. Okay, so now, Jason, we're going to move forward. We've now reached chart number 19, also known as the final charts of 1980 in my bedroom in West Lorne, Ontario.
Okay, what I find interesting about this chart is that although you were too charitable to their latest single and album earlier in the show, for the week ending December 27th, Blondie took all 3 fastest movers Arabs. Like, you just disparaged them for like 5 minutes, and
I could go on longer, but you want to keep this moving. I'll give them credit. It was a feat that honestly did not occur often. The single "The Tide Is High" jumped from number 9 to number 5, bumping the Police's "Don't Stand So Close to Me" out of the top 5. Number 5 is actually the highest it would go, which today seems wrong. I know you're not a huge Police fan, but to me, if I would think about that song, I'm like, oh no, that was number 1, I'm sure. And here it only got to top 5 and, started going down from there.
Okay, well, more importantly, not the Police, on the singles chart, Springsteen and Lennon continued their stranglehold at 1 and number 2. Mm-hmm. However, in the near future, 2 of the 3 songs now sitting at 3, 4, and 5 would top the chart.
Okay, so I guess this is the quiz part. So hit the 3 songs, and 2 of these will become, number 1 songs in the short period. The songs were "Without Your Love" by Roger Daltrey, up 1 to number 3. "Do Do 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 Da 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 Da," The Police, up 2 to number 4, and the aforementioned "The Tide Is High" at number 5. So 2 of those 3 will be a number 1 song shortly.
And on the groups chart, Blondie exploded from number 24 to number 8. Can you explain this?
The only thing I can say is I don't really recall having an unpublished list of bubbling under bands, although I must have kept track of them on a weekly basis too. Because when you look back at chart number 1 and the subsequent 18 weeks, it reveals the following bands leaving the top 15. So these bands were all on chart number 1 18 weeks ago, and they've all left the top 15. And the bands are Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, the J. Giles Band, Genesis, Pink Floyd, Your Group, Supertramp, Christopher Cross, The Pretenders, and Meatloaf. So that's 23 bands in all. So using this math, because I used to be really good in accounting, it's probably safe to say that Blondie would have been number 24. So the real question, Jason, is that week, who was number 25? We will never know.
Okay, and the other development on the group's rankings was Pat Benatar's rise to the number 2 position based on her 2 albums, In the Heat of the Night from 79 and Crimes of Passion from 80. Now that was deserved, I think.
It is. I mean, both are fantastic albums. So, as with other situations when a song or an album is denied the number 1 spot, it's always fun to imagine that if I hadn't been introduced, in air quotes, to Bruce Springsteen 1 month earlier, that would mean that Pat Benatar would have been my top group / artist, beating out very established artists that I'd been collecting for years. So she was still very new, but now she would be number 1. So if we go one step further, if Springsteen had remained completely unknown to me, my number 1 groups over the 2-year period on my charts also would have included The Police, AC/DC, Adam and the Ants, REO Speedwagon, and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And the final groups chart was chart number 42, which was published in June 1981. So it's kind of crazy when you look at, if I'd never got turned on to Bruce Springsteen, like such an interesting, I don't know, diverse collection of The Police, AC/DC, Adam and the Ants. He's on tour too. He's in Detroit next week. I'm not seeing him though. REO Speedwagon and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Like really, that just was the diverse music that I was listening to. And I know they're all AC/DC sort of on one, on one hand, where the other ones are kind of, popish, mainstreamish, right? But yeah, those would have been my biggest bands. Can you imagine if we were doing an episode, Jason, and Adam and the Ant was the number one group? You would lose your mind.
Thanks, Springsteen.
In a world that Eric Clapton was number one with cocaine, this would put you over the edge. It really would.
Okay, and finally for Blondie's three-peat on the albums chart, their Autoamerican snuck into the number 4 position. Can you explain this?
I can't. Also of note on that chart is the fact that 4 of the original top 10 albums from week number 1, 13 weeks earlier, remained, with The Game by Queen and Crimes of Passion by Pat Benatar ranking higher than even newer albums that I had. And you can also see that the current positions of The Police at number 2 and Cheap Trick at number 8, they both debuted 8 weeks earlier. You can see that my growing interest in new wave, hence The Police, and disappointment perhaps with All Shook Up, the Cheap Trick album, after it not really continuing the winning ways of the Dream Police.
Okay, now looking at various industry charts at the same time, it's interesting that Top 40 AM radio started 1980 with one bracketed title song, Escape, the Pina Colada song, at number 1, and finished with another bracketed song, brackets, Just Like, Starting Over, at number 1.
Again, Jason, we've discussed this quite a bit. It was a very exciting year for music. It was sort of a blend of old and actual new bands with the start of the new wave era mixed in, but for me, just a little. When you examine the major albums of the year, it reveals that there was career-defining releases by Queen, Bob Seger, Pink Floyd, Billy Joel, and Led Zeppelin, along with upcoming artists like The Police, Blondie, Pat Benatar, and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers finally broke through, even though they've been around for a couple of years. So although 1981 would be the only January to December full calendar year covered on my charts, I could still use my August to December 1980 weekly charts to assist with my now annual project, the year-end charts.
Which we will be covering potentially in a bonus episode coming up.
Yeah, so the crazy thing about the year-end charts for 1980 is there were top 50. There was a top 50 singles chart and a top 25 albums chart. So we will keep you updated when that episode is going to air, because you don't want to miss it.
Okay, well, be sure to like and follow our Facebook and Instagram pages, where you'll find relevant pictures, information, and, of course, the actual typewritten chart to review and debate amongst yourselves, family, and friends.
Now, feel free to give us your comments about the show and leave comments about the songs you loved in the early 80s. We'd love to hear from you.
The Music Virgins No More podcast was recorded in Amherstburg, Ontario, and Lloydminster, Alberta.